Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Elena Delgado paced the hospital corridor, clinging to the warmth of her lab coat as if it could shield her from the chill in her heart. Usually, the steady rhythm of beeping monitors and the hum of fluorescent lights provided her comfort. Tonight, those familiar sounds only magnified the unease gnawing at her. She was supposed to be home, finalizing wedding details with her fiancé, Marcus. Instead, she'd volunteered for an extra shift, anything to avoid the tension that now lurked between them like a silent intruder. They had picked a wedding date 6 months ago on a sunlit morning, brimming with love and plans for the future. Back then, Marcus would eagerly text her throughout the day, send her flowers on a whim, and happily discuss honeymoon possibilities. Lately, all of that had vanished. He was cagey, glued to his phone whenever they were together. The affectionate sparkle in his eyes had grown dull, replaced by a distance she couldn't bridge. Dr. Delgado called a nurse, beckoning Elena to the front desk. Mrs. Harlow's vitals are stable now, but she's asking for you. Elena nodded, grateful for the distraction. She hurried to check on her patient, hoping the flurry of medical tasks might quiet her worries. Yet as soon as she finished her rounds, her thoughts drifted back to Marcus, his tight-lipped excuses, his recent habit of hiding his screen when she entered the room. She told herself it was just wedding stress, but her intuition whispered otherwise. When she finally slid behind the wheel of her car, the clock read midnight. She scrolled through her phone, one missed call from her best friend, Carmen, and none from Marcus. Sighing, she dialed Carmen. "You're out late again," Carmen said by way of greeting. "Let me guess, another shift?" "Yes," Elena replied, rubbing her temple. "And I still feel like I'm avoiding something." Carmen paused. "You sound exhausted. Did you talk to Marcus about what's bothering you?" Elena swallowed hard. "Not exactly. Every time I try, he brushes me off. It's like he's a million miles away." "Maybe it's pre-wedding jitters," Carmen offered, though her voice carried a note of doubt. "You both work stressful jobs. Things get complicated." Elena wished that explanation rang true. "Sure," she mumbled, forcing a small laugh. "Maybe I'm overreacting." She disconnected the call and drove home, her thoughts swirling. She remembered the day Marcus proposed. He had led her down to a secluded stretch of beach, his heart in his eyes. With the waves crashing at their ankles, he promised his unwavering devotion. Now, she couldn't recall the last time she felt that certainty. Their apartment was dark when she arrived. She found a hastily written note on the kitchen counter in his neat handwriting, "Working late. See you tomorrow." Elena's heart sank. Once upon a time, she would have believed it without question. Over the next few days, Elena tried to ignore the growing tension. She purchased a few bridal magazines, hoping to rekindle the excitement she once felt. Yet every glossy page filled her with dread instead of delight. Each romantic centerpiece or honeymoon tip became a painful reminder of what felt like a vanishing dream. One evening, she mustered her courage and decided to confront Marcus directly. He had promised to be home by 7 for dinner. By 8 he still hadn't arrived. The takeout she'd ordered grew cold on the table. When the door finally swung open, Marcus looked preoccupied, his phone in hand. "Sorry," he muttered, tossing his keys aside. "Work emergency." She folded her arms. "Marcus, we need to talk." His eyes flickered with unease. "Sure. Give me a minute." He walked into the bedroom without further explanation. Frustration mounted in Elena's chest. She followed him, finding him hunched over his phone, typing rapidly. "Marcus, please," she said, voice tight. "What's going on with you?" He glanced up, forced a smile. "Nothing. Just a rough day." "A rough day for weeks, you mean?" she pressed. "You barely speak to me. You're always on your phone, or working. I don't even know what's true anymore." Marcus inhaled sharply. "Elena, I'm just..." He broke off as his phone vibrated. His gaze darted to the screen before he shoved it into his pocket. Look, it's complicated. I can't explain everything right now. Elena's heart pounded. Why not? Because it's late and I'm exhausted, he snapped. Can we just drop it? Stung, she watched him brush past her to the bathroom. The door closed, a stark barrier between them. She stood there trembling, anger and hurt waging war inside her. How had they reached this point? Later, alone in the dimly lit living room, Elena stared at her engagement ring. She recalled the night he slipped it on her finger, the words he whispered, "Forever, no matter what." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. In the silence, she heard the echo of unspoken truths, like whispers in the walls of a once happy home. The following day at work, Elena tried to push aside her personal strife, attending to patients with professional focus. Yet as she passed two nurses chatting near the supply room, she overheard a snippet. Dr. Wood's fiancé was spotted with someone else downtown. Elena's footsteps faltered, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. She forced herself to keep walking, head held high, but her mind reeled. Was that about Marcus? She wondered, recalling the times he'd claimed to be too busy for date night. Now, every evasive gesture flashed before her eyes. That evening, she couldn't shake the ominous feeling. Sitting alone in her office, she realized she couldn't keep ignoring the signs. Love, trust, and the life they had planned were all at stake. She had to uncover the truth, even if it threatened to upend everything she thought she knew about Marcus and their future together. Marcus Reed stood outside the towering glass building that housed his finance firm, checking his reflection in the polished doors. Though he had spent the night at home, his thoughts were elsewhere, wandering back to the spontaneous smiles and bright laughter of Zara. He told himself it was just a friendly connection, a passing fascination. Still, he couldn't deny the thrill that zipped through him whenever he recalled the weekend they met. It had happened at a company retreat 3 weeks earlier. Marcus, usually reserved at corporate events, found himself seated beside Zara during a team-building workshop. While everyone else talked mergers and revenue, she enthused about a new marketing campaign she hoped to pilot. Her vivacity broke through his typical caution, and he found himself smiling at jokes he normally wouldn't find amusing. By the end of the day, they were joking like old friends, comparing notes on their departments. When the official sessions ended, a group headed to the resort's poolside bar. Under golden lights and soft music, Marcus sipped a drink beside Zara. She teased him about his overly formal suits, and he teased back about her color-coded planner. Each banter-laced quip revealed shared ambitions. It felt strange but liberating to talk to someone who viewed him with fresh eyes, unaware of his burdens. Elena called that evening, but Marcus let it go to voicemail, telling himself he was too busy. He'd call her first thing in the morning. For once, he wanted to forget obligations and wedding stress, if only for a few hours. Across the patio, Zara caught his gaze and flashed a bright grin. For reasons he couldn't explain, his heart thudded in response. When the retreat ended, Marcus and Zara exchanged contact information, citing work collaborations as the excuse. At first, they messaged about routine tasks, budget approvals, marketing timelines. Gradually, their texts ventured into personal territory, favorite restaurants, childhood memories, silly gifts sent late at night. Marcus noticed a rush of anticipation whenever his phone buzzed with her name. One Wednesday afternoon, he found himself lingering at the office after hours. Zara popped by his desk with a mischievous smile. "I'm starving," she announced. "Know any good spots around here?" He hesitated, remembering Elena waiting at home. Still, the temptation to prolong this easy rapport won out. "There's a tapas place a few blocks away," he offered. "We could grab dinner." They slipped into a dimly lit restaurant with exposed brick and fragrant spices in the air. Marcus, usually guarded, found himself opening up about his stressful workload, client meetings, investor calls, the daily grind. Zara nodded sympathetically, describing her own challenges in marketing. They leaned in close, trading honest thoughts in a way Marcus realized he hadn't done with Elena in far too long. After dinner, the warmth of Zara's presence lingered with him. As they parted, she gave him a quick hug that left his senses reeling. Driving home, guilt wove itself into his excitement. He was engaged. Elena was waiting. Yet all he could think about was Zara's laughter. The following week, Elena confronted him at the apartment, worried about his absences. Marcus feigned extra work, carefully omitting any mention of Zara. He brushed a kiss across Elena's cheek, hoping to quell her concerns. But the very next evening, he joined Zara for a spur-of-the-moment coffee break that lasted 2 hours. Sitting in a quiet cafe, they spoke about everything except his personal life. Zara confessed her dream of launching her own firm someday. Marcus admired her spark, comparing it to the fade he felt in his own life. She pressed him for details about his background, and he answered in partial truths, skillfully sidestepping mention of the fiancée who waited at home. Each new secret meeting became easier to justify. A quick lunch, a brainstorming session that bled into dinner, a late-night text exchange that stretched toward dawn. Zara, charmed by his intelligence and ambition, believed him single. Marcus, fueled by the novelty of her attention, couldn't bear to break the illusion. He told himself his relationship with Elena had grown stale. He blamed mounting wedding expenses and chaotic schedules. Yet a knot of guilt formed whenever Elena tried to discuss guest lists or invitations. He offered vague excuses, too tired, too busy, while his mind replayed the glow of Zara's eyes. One night, Marcus and Zara ended up at a jazz lounge after work. The band's sultry trumpet wove a spell around them, and they fell into an intimacy neither acknowledged aloud. Over softly played tunes, Zara glanced at Marcus with a question in her gaze. He kissed her before the question formed, surprising them both. Even as his pulse soared, a voice in his head warned him he was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But he brushed it aside, letting the melody of saxophones and Zara's laughter swallow his conscience. By the time he slipped into the apartment, Elena was asleep, the wedding planners spread across her lap. Marcus gently removed the binder, heart-lurching. Photos of venues, notes on florists, all the evidence of her faith in him. He remembered proposing on a beach under the stars, vowing forever. Now, that vow trembled beneath the weight of his deceit. Despite the guilt, he texted Zara a simple goodnight. She replied instantly, and his chest tightened with a longing he couldn't explain. He glanced at Elena's peaceful face. She didn't stir. In the glow of his phone screen, he inhaled shakily, torn between the life he had built and the promise of something dangerously new. He told himself he would sort it out soon, figure out why his heart raced for Zara and why Elena's trust felt like a cage. In truth, he had no plan. He only knew that every moment with Zara made the lies bigger. Day by day, he waded deeper into an affair that was both exhilarating and terrifying, convinced that somehow he could keep everything from crashing down around him. Zara woke one morning with a wave of nausea so intense her breath caught in her throat. She had brushed aside similar pangs for a week, blaming bad takeout or anxiety over work. This time, doubt gnawed persistently at her, prompting her to rummage in a drawer for a pregnancy test. Her hands shook while she waited for the result, heart pounding in her ears. When the faint pink line appeared, her world spun. She was pregnant. In the mirror, she whispered the word, scarcely believing it. Her mind danced with simultaneous excitement and dread. She imagined a tiny heartbeat growing inside her and felt a spark of joy beneath her ribcage. But a flicker of fear quickly followed. Marcus had never spoken of fatherhood, nor had he introduced her to anyone in his life. She reminded herself that their relationship was still fresh, that he simply needed time. That evening, she texted Marcus, asking him to come over. He arrived close to 10, looking harried. Without ceremony, she held up the test. "Marcus, I'm pregnant." He stared at the pink line. Emotions flickered over his face, shock, awe, and a ripple of panic. "Are you sure?" "I have a doctor's appointment next week," she replied, "but yes, I'm sure." He exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "Wow, that's huge." Then he pulled her into a tight embrace, and for a moment, she allowed herself to hope. When he finally murmured, "We'll figure this out," her heart soared. A small voice in her head asked why he seemed more anxious than thrilled, but she dismissed it as normal shock. Days turned into weeks, and Zara's pregnancy began to feel more real with every wave of morning sickness and each routine checkup. Marcus accompanied her to the first appointment. Sitting in the exam room, he squeezed her hand, and a flicker of genuine excitement lit his gaze when they heard the baby's heartbeat. In that instant, Zara imagined a future filled with family milestones. But outside the hospital, his demeanor shifted. Whenever she suggested announcing the pregnancy, he insisted on waiting. "My family is complicated," he would say, offering no details. "We need the right timing." Zara tried to respect his caution, though she yearned to share her joy. As her belly grew, she dreamed of buying baby clothes, meeting grandparents, and planning their child's life. Still, Marcus evaded anything that hinted at integrating her into his world. Her friends asked why she never brought him to gatherings. She made excuses about his schedule, feeling a stab of loneliness every time. Meanwhile, Marcus kept promising that work projects would ease soon. She clung to his reassurances, hoping he would finally introduce her to the rest of his life. One evening, she prepared a candlelit dinner, determined to talk through their plans. Marcus arrived late, frowning at his phone. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. He forced a smile. "Just a finance report due next week. Nothing to worry about." She served pasta and salad, trying to maintain the romantic mood. "We need to plan," she ventured, bracing for pushback. "If we're having a baby, we should look at places together." He swallowed hard. "I agree, but let's not rush. My office is insane right now. Give me a month or two, and we'll talk." That night, as he slept, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Whenever his phone buzzed, he turned it face down. She told herself it was just work, but unease crept in. By her second trimester, people at her own job congratulated her openly, yet Marcus remained a ghost to them. Attending prenatal classes alone, Zara noticed couples practicing breathing exercises while she struggled solo. She repeatedly reminded Marcus about the classes, but he claimed urgent deadlines each time. Still, he swore he cared deeply for her and their baby. She felt torn between her love for him and the suspicion clouding his behavior. One afternoon, she spotted him hastily tucking a small velvet box into his briefcase. "Is that for me?" she teased, hoping for a romantic surprise. He froze. "Just an old family heirloom. I was getting it cleaned," he mumbled, then left without further explanation. Distracted at first, Zara soon replayed the moment, her doubts intensifying. He was hiding more than details about his parents. Their arguments grew more frequent. She demanded to know why he never let her meet anyone close to him. He deflected, promising that once he secured a critical deal, he would invite her into every aspect of his life. Tension weighed on them like a gathering storm. As her belly swelled and the baby's kicks became stronger, Zara realized time was running out. She couldn't hide her pregnancy from the world, nor did she want to. Yet Marcus stayed withdrawn, dodging questions about their shared future. Finally, on a rainy night, she confronted him in her small living room, the lamplight reflecting off the puddles outside. "The baby will be here in a few months," she said, voice trembling. "I'm done waiting. We need real plans. I want a home, a family that isn't built on secrets." Marcus stood by the window, shadows dancing across his face. "You're right," he murmured, running a hand through his hair. "But trust me a bit longer. I promise I'll tell everyone soon." Tears pricked her eyes. "Trust you? You won't even let me meet your parents. You talk about the future, but never with any specifics." He rested a tentative hand on her belly. "I swear this child means everything to me. Please, Zara, just a little more time." She blinked back tears, recalling their baby's steady heartbeat. While she yearned to believe in his promises, the silence surrounding them felt suffocating. Outside, thunder rolled, mirroring the turmoil inside her. If Marcus couldn't break his barriers soon, their child might enter a world of broken vows. The rumble of thunder shook Zara's small apartment, rattling the windows and sending a jolt of unease through her body. Rain lashed against the glass, punctuating a night already thick with tension. She sat on the edge of her sofa, cradling her heavily pregnant belly. A sharp twinge rippled across her abdomen, more painful than the Braxton Hicks contractions she had been experiencing for weeks. With trembling hands, she tried to time the intervals on her phone's stopwatch. "Marcus," she whispered, clutching her phone. They had planned for this moment, or so she believed. But each time she tried to discuss a birth plan, he had been too distracted or evasive. Now, the reality of labor slammed into her. She needed him more than ever. She pressed his number, heart hammering as the call rang on. The storm's relentless downpour thundered in the background, mingling with her rising panic. When his voicemail kicked in, she almost collapsed under the weight of fear. Groaning through another contraction, she tried again. Finally, on the third attempt, he picked up. "Zara?" he answered, breathless. "I'm sorry, I was in a meeting." A flash of frustration pierced through her pain. "Marcus?" she gasped. "I think I'm in labor." Silence crackled on the line, broken only by distant thunder. "Oh God! Hang on, I'm on my way." She breathed a ragged sigh of relief and struggled to stand. The overnight bag she had packed weeks ago sat by the door. As she tried to steady her breathing, another contraction pulsed through her, this time stronger. Fear gnawed at her resolve. Despite all their secrets and unspoken truths, she longed for Marcus's support. Meanwhile, across town, Elena rubbed her tired eyes in the break room of the hospital. She had nearly finished a long shift and was looking forward to going home, microwaving leftovers, and crawling into bed. Her engagement to Marcus was still a tangled mess, but she craved the solitude of her own thoughts. Just as she drained the last of her lukewarm coffee, her phone buzzed. Dr. Martin's voice crackled over the line. "Elena, can you cover the overnight emergency shift? Dr. Patel called in sick. We're slammed, some maternity cases, plus this crazy storm." Elena hesitated, exhaustion tugging at her. But instinct and duty outweighed her fatigue. "All right," she said, massaging the bridge of her nose. "I'll handle it." She changed into fresh scrubs, half listening to the thunder raging outside. Storms often triggered a spike in emergency visits, slippery roads caused accidents, and expectant mothers sometimes went into labor. Bracing for a busy night, Elena headed toward labor and delivery, mentally reviewing procedures. Rain battered the windshield of Marcus's car as he raced through the flooded streets. His mind whirled with anxiety. Zara's voice echoed in his head, "I'm in labor." He gripped the steering wheel tighter, every nerve frayed. He'd avoided telling Zara about Elena, and avoided telling Elena about Zara's pregnancy. Now he faced the terrifying reality that his secrets were converging. Pulling up to Zara's apartment complex, he bolted out of the car with an umbrella. She stood at the entrance, hunched over, pain etched on her face. Without a word, he guided her into the passenger seat, heart pounding as he tried to reassure her that everything would be fine. Clutching his hand, Zara fought the urge to cry out. "Please, just drive," she managed, sweat beading on her forehead. They navigated dark streets, water gushing around the tires. Between contractions, Zara breathed in short, desperate bursts. Marcus scanned for the nearest hospital entrance, cursing the congested roads and limited visibility. Finally, the sprawling medical center came into view, bright fluorescent lights cutting through the blackness. Marcus pulled up to the emergency entrance, his heart clattering in his chest. Nurses rushed to help as he grabbed Zara's bag. "I'm right here," he told her, voice unsteady. She squeezed his hand, too overwhelmed to respond. In triage, the midwife ran quick tests. Zara's contractions were close, her baby's heartbeat strong. The next step was to move her to labor and delivery. Marcus jogged beside the gurney, wiping sweat from his forehead. Unbeknownst to them, Elena stood on the other side of the ward, listening as Dr. Martin explained that several maternity patients had arrived in the past hour. She tensed at the mention of a complicated labor case. "I'll take one," she volunteered. "What room?" Dr. Martin scanned the chart. "Room 304, but they're still getting the patient settled. Contractions are intense. She's a new arrival, no prior records here." Elena nodded, stepping purposefully down the corridor. Lightning flickered through the window, illuminating the swirling storm outside. She mentally prepared for a high-pressure situation. The chaos of the storm often spilled over into hospital halls. Marcus hovered near Zara's bedside, stroking her clammy forehead. He tried to project confidence, but sweat pooled at his collar. Doctors and nurses bustled around them, and the baby monitor beeped with urgent steadiness. Zara whimpered as a harsh contraction racked her body. "Excuse me," a nurse said, drawing Marcus aside. "We're going to bring the obstetrician in any minute." "Are you the father?" Her words jolted him. He could only nod. Then the nurse disappeared, leaving him grappling with his own guilt. "What about Elena?" A voice in his head demanded, reminding him of the fiancée he'd abandoned with half-truths and excuses. Outside the room, Elena scanned a clipboard, confirming her next patient's details. She heard the muffled sound of pained groans and the thick hum of tense conversation. Someone called her name, and she turned toward room 304, heart pounding in anticipation. Inside, Zara clutched the bed rail, tears streaming down her cheeks. Marcus stood at her side, uncertain hands hovering near her arm. Thunder rattled the window, casting ragged shadows across the walls. In that charged instant, amid fear, sweat, and frantic hope, fate drew them all closer, step by irrevocable step. Elena reached for the doorknob. The baby was coming and the storm raged on. Little did any of them realize that with one final push, an unforeseen truth was about to shatter everything they knew, leaving no escape from the consequences of choices made in silence. Thunder rumbled through the hospital's hallways, each vibration intensifying the tension swirling around room 304. Elena stood outside, bracing herself for another high-pressure case. She heard frantic voices within, a cry of pain, and the urgent beep of monitors. With a steadying breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. A laboring woman lay on the bed, her face contorted with agony. At her side stood a man, his back turned to Elena. His posture looked familiar, though her focus stayed on the patient. A nurse handed Elena the chart. Zara Walton, first pregnancy, active labor. Contractions dangerously close. As Elena approached, the man glanced over his shoulder, and her entire world tilted. It was Marcus. For a moment, time fractured. Elena forgot to breathe. Every suspicion, every late-night doubt, coalesced into horrifying clarity. He was here with this pregnant woman, cradling her hand and whispering desperate reassurances. The betrayal punched Elena's lungs, stealing her voice. She forced down the urge to scream, instead shifting into the cool professionalism she'd honed over years of practice. "Doctor?" a nurse prompted, concern flickering in her eyes. Elena exhaled, summoning her training. "Let's assess the patient." Marcus, pale and shaking, stared at her, guilt radiating from him. Before he could speak, Zara moaned, gripping his arm. Elena forced herself to ignore the personal turmoil and focus on Zara's distress. She examined the readouts on the monitor. The baby's heart rate was elevated, and Zara's contractions were coming too fast. "Elena," Marcus finally croaked, voice trembling. She stiffened, refusing to meet his gaze. "We'll discuss everything later," she said, injecting a calm she did not feel. Turning to Zara, she introduced herself. "I'm Dr. Delgado. How are you holding up?" Zara blinked through sweat and tears, uncertain. I can't believe how much this hurts. Please help me." Her grip tightened on Marcus's hand, and he flinched, as though pained by more than her strength. Elena nodded briskly. "We'll do everything we can to make you comfortable. You're in good hands." Her voice wavered slightly. The moment felt surreal, treating the pregnant lover of her fiancé, feigning composure while her own world collapsed. Zara continued panting, a sheen of desperation in her eyes. Through labored breaths, she noticed the tension thrumming between Marcus and the doctor. "Marcus," she mumbled. "What's going on?" He opened his mouth but no words emerged. Elena gestured to a nurse. "Let's get her an epidural. We need to stabilize her heart rate and the baby's." The nurse nodded, hurrying to fetch the anesthesiologist. Zara's contraction peaked with a ragged scream. Elena moved swiftly, adjusting monitors, coaching Zara through her breathing. Despite the roaring storm in her heart, she couldn't let a patient suffer. "Steady breaths in and out," she coaxed. "You're doing well." Marcus hovered, unsure, The color drained from his face. When Zara's pain subsided for a beat, she peered at Elena through half-lidded eyes. Dr. Delgado, Marcus is my... She paused, uncertain how to define him. He's important to me. A rush of bitterness flared in Elena's chest. She forced another clinical smile. I see. The silence thickened, broken by another deep rumble of thunder. The anesthesiologist arrived, administering the epidural with Elena's guidance. Zara sagged back, relief evident, though the emotional undercurrent remained. Marcus gently smoothed the hair from Zara's forehead, his hand shaking. His entire demeanor screamed apology, but he couldn't release it with words. Elena watched through a detached haze. She'd spent months sensing that Marcus was hiding something. Now, face to face with the undeniable truth, she fought the urge to tear off her scrubs and flee. But this was her profession, her calling. Zara needed her. So she steeled herself, compartmentalizing the pain. Finally, as Zara's breathing stabilized, a nurse took Elena aside to confirm details. Marcus followed, voice low. Elena, please, let me explain. She fixed him with a piercing glare. Not now, she snapped. Zara needs calm, not drama. That's my priority. His eyes shone with regret. I never wanted you to find out like this. She bit back a sharp retort, struggling to remain professional. We'll talk when she's safe. Until then, stay out of the way unless you're helping her. He nodded stiffly, returning to Zara's side. Elena clenched her jaw, forcing her focus on vital signs and fluid intake. When Zara's heart rate dipped, Elena leapt into action, adjusting 4 lines and conferring with the nurse. Despite her personal anguish, her training took over. She guided Zara through her contractions, ensuring both mother and baby remained stable. Minutes bled into hours, the storm outside intensifying. Lightning flashed intermittently, illuminating the tension in the room. Zara's epidural took effect, easing her physical pain, though tears pooled in her eyes. She sensed that Marcus and Elena shared a fractured history. Confusion laced her every question. Marcus, why won't you look at her? What's happening? He swallowed hard, torn between soothing Zara and confronting Elena's fury. It's complicated, he muttered. Zara fixed him with a desperate look. You said your family was strict, that you couldn't tell them about the baby. But she's not your family, is she? Marcus closed his eyes. She's... Elena stepped back, drawing in a breath. This was it. The moment the secret would burst forth. Zara stared at Marcus, dread dawning in her gaze. She remembered his vague excuses, the late-night calls he refused to answer in her presence, the business dinners that stretched too long. Tell me, Zara whispered. Marcus's mouth opened, but the words lodged in his throat. He looked helplessly at Elena. She felt her composure crumble and spat out the truth he couldn't. I'm his fiancée. A stunned silence fell, broken only by the steady beep of monitors and the distant roar of thunder. Zara's face went slack. Her eyes darted from Elena's ringless hand to Marcus's anguished expression. No, she gasped, tears sliding down her cheeks. You told me. He reached for her, but she jerked away, new pain tearing through her, both physical and emotional. You lied, she hissed. Elena swallowed the lump in her throat, fighting to keep her voice even. We can handle the details later. Right now, you need to focus on delivering this baby safely. Zara let out a broken sob as another contraction clamped down. Marcus tried to soothe her, but she recoiled, eyes brimming with betrayal. Elena forced herself forward, mind racing with medical instructions. She would do her duty, deliver this child into the world. Then she would walk away from Marcus forever, no matter how shattered her heart felt. Lightning glared white against the window as Zara's contractions subsided. In that flash of brilliance, Elena saw the devastation etched into Zara's face and the remorse darkening Marcus's eyes. No words could mend the damage. The storm raged on, inside and out, as they prepared for the final act of a secret that had nowhere left to hide. Zara's anguished cry thundered through the delivery room, rivaling the storm raging outside. Sweat beaded on her brow, her knuckles white as she gripped the bed rails. The contraction hit like a wave, doubling her over with pain. At her side stood Elena, silent but steady, guiding Zara through the final stage of labor. It was Elena's duty, despite her broken heart. In the corner, Marcus hovered uselessly, guilt etched into his features. He had tried to comfort Zara, but she had spurned his touch the moment Elena revealed she was his fiancée. Now, his eyes flicked between Zara's agony and Elena's determined composure. Lightning flashed at the window, exposing his every flaw in stark detail. "Zara," Elena said calmly, pressing a cool cloth to the laboring woman's forehead. "You're almost there. Push with the next contraction." Tears streamed down Zara's cheeks. Rage, betrayal, and heartbreak mingled with her frantic desire to bring her child safely into the world. She fixed her gaze on Elena, stunned at the kindness the doctor still offered. I'm sorry," she gasped between ragged breaths. "I didn't know he was—" "It's all right," Elena murmured, though her voice strained. "Focus on your baby." Marcus took a tentative step forward. "Zara." "Don't," she spat, her eyes brimming with fury. Another contraction tore through her, silencing any further words. Elena guided Zara through the push, one hand positioned to support the baby's descent. Despite the emotional chaos, her training anchored her actions. She counted softly, encouraging Zara in measured tones. A nurse handed Elena gauze, then stepped back, watching intently as life neared its entry point. Zara screamed, body tensing. Then, all at once, a fragile cry pierced the air. Elena eased the newborn into her gloved hands, heart hammering at the miracle of new life. Thunder rattled the windows again, but Zara's sob of relief overshadowed the storm. A hush fell as Elena swiftly checked the baby's vitals. The infant's cry came loud and strong, stirring tears in the exhausted mother's eyes. Marcus remained frozen, uncertain if he was welcome to approach. Finally, Elena handed the wailing child to Zara, who cradled her newborn with trembling arms. Is my baby okay?" Zara asked, voice shaking. Elena nodded. "A healthy baby girl." She carefully removed her gloves. For a moment, she allowed herself a hint of a smile, marveling at the tiny fingers curling against Zara's chest. Marcus, eyes swimming with emotion, edged closer. "A girl," he breathed. "We have a daughter." Zara looked up, tears still glistening, uncertain whether to share this moment with him. The betrayal felt fresh, like an open wound. Yet the child he had fathered was here, alive and undeniably his. Gingerly, Marcus reached out, brushing a fingertip over his daughter's cheek. His eyes met Zara's in a silent plea for forgiveness. Elena turned away, swallowing the ache in her throat. She had done her duty. Now came the reckoning. Nurses bustled about, ensuring the mother was stable, the baby's vitals consistent. Elena knew she had to speak to her patient about aftercare, but her emotions were raw. Before she could steel herself, Zara's ragged voice broke the silence. "Elena, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Elena blinked back tears. She wanted to hate Zara but found she couldn't. This woman had been deceived just as she had. "It's not your fault." Her tone was clipped, but empathy underpinned it. Zara glanced down at her newborn, heartbreak shadowing the miraculous moment. "I can't believe all those times he said he'd tell his family. I never knew he meant you." Marcus flinched, stepping back as if a physical blow had landed. "I was going to tell you both," he whispered, but the words rang hollow. An uncomfortable quiet settled, punctuated by the baby's whimpers. Elena removed her mask and took a steady breath. "Zara, the nurses will help you with the next steps. I'll check on you in a bit." She moved toward the door, every fiber of her being screaming for an exit. Marcus seized the moment to follow. In the corridor, fluorescent lights illuminated the anguish on his face. "Elena, please," he began, voice thick with remorse. She spun around, keeping her voice low. "Don't. There's nothing left to say that can fix this." He raked a hand through his hair. "I never stopped loving you." "Stop." Her tone trembled. "You humiliated me, lied to both of us, and made me deliver your child while you stood there pretending I didn't exist." She fought the sting of tears, forcing composure. I won't make a scene in the hospital, but understand, we're done. Marcus's shoulders slumped. I understand. Elena inhaled shakily. You need to be there for your daughter now. Don't fail her like you failed me. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone under the glaring lights. Back in room 304, Zara clutched her newborn, tears falling anew. She remembered the joy she felt while imagining Marcus as a supportive partner. Now she was here, a single mother blindsided by betrayal. One of the nurses, noticing her distress, gently squeezed her shoulder. Take a deep breath, the nurse murmured. Focus on your baby. She needs you. As Zara gazed down at her daughter's tiny face, a fragile sense of resolve ignited in her. Marcus's lies had shattered her trust, but she refused to let them define her child's future. She pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead, whispering, I promise I'll do my best. Meanwhile, Elena discarded her gloves and gown, methodically washing her hands as if trying to cleanse herself of the entire ordeal. She recalled her hopes and dreams with Marcus, the wedding, the future they'd planned. In a single night, it had all broken beyond repair. A harsh sob escaped her, quickly stifled in the deserted locker room. Yet in that moment of heartbreak, she felt a subtle spark of liberation. The truth had been laid bare, and though it hurt, at least she wasn't trapped by illusions. Leaving the hospital behind, Elena stepped out into the rainy dawn. Water splashed around her feet, but she relished the fresh air. She would find a way forward, no matter how uncertain. Months later, Zara would remember that night as both an ending and a beginning. She would eventually forge a path of independence, finding a community of support where she least expected it. Elena, too, would move on, discovering new depths of resilience she never realized she possessed. Though the cut had been deep, it led them both to a future free from secrets. In time, each woman would heal, bolstered by a quiet strength born of surviving heartbreak. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.